I've graduated into Indy Car racing, and I'm a fueler now, which is like the most fun job I've ever done in my entire life. But there is something special about taking a 3,400-pound truck that's got 1,000 horsepower and jumping it 200 feet.
Oh, yeah.
And then catching it, right? And then catching it and going into a corner.
Yeah. This is Faith Family Cars Podcast. I'm Jerry.
I'm Zach.
Hit the key.
Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. That was Proverbs 27:17.
Hey guys, welcome back to Faith Family Cars Podcast. As you can see, we are in a remote location. We're here at Circle City Speed Shop, and we've got Matt Barton with us today. Matt, good to have you with us.
Thanks, guys. Welcome. Good morning.
So we got connected together. We met with Mark Frisbee.
Seems like that's
he
how we get
introduced
connected
us to you.
Yeah. Somehow he knows everybody.
He does. Everybody.
So sneaky.
And it's crazy because he knows like people who are in all kinds of different industries too, mainly automotive. He's got a lot of automotive friends, but I'm just like, how many more people is he going to introduce us to? Because I still think he's got a few up his sleeve.
I'm pretty sure last time we talked to him, you guys talked about construction because y'all somehow knew the same construction people.
We did.
Or something.
We did. So anyway, Matt, it has been an honor to meet you because you're into motorsports, and that's not really anything that we've been very much involved in. And we've already heard so much and learned so much from you that we had no clue about. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get into some of that today. And but tell us about your shop here, because if you guys can see behind us, there is all kinds of fabricating equipment. And tell us a little bit about what you do.
So Circle City Speed Shop, we kind of bill ourselves as like just a one-stop shop. Where we kind of build your dreams into reality. We sell ourselves as one of the premier spots in Indiana to bring your custom car, race car, or a high-end fabrication project. Through the varied million jobs that I've had in my life, and it's been 27 years professionally racing over different disciplines. There's not much I haven't seen or worked on, and so we just kind of it's really just me as a one-man band. But I take all that 25 years of knowledge and just apply it to everyday weekend warrior type guys now on projects.
Well, yeah, 25 years of knowledge is a lot of knowledge. I mean, and in automotive, you've probably pretty much seen about everything. Now, I'm sure most guys like myself, no matter what industry you're in, you say that you're always learning. There's things to learn, but still you've ran into probably about everything.
Yeah, just about. I mean, like that 25 years really is racing experience as a professional racing mechanic. But I started working when I was 15 at a Ford dealership in South Lake Tahoe, which actually was owned by Carroll Shelby at one time.
Wow,
cool. A Cliff Clavin fact. Yeah. So I worked in one of the shops that supposedly he built cars in. I can't really verify that, but no, I had to. We kind of lied about what I did, and I had to beg for that job. Like when I moved to Tahoe, I was looking for a job. My parents were always good about paying for things as long as I was playing sports. I grew up as an athlete in my life and played football in a junior college. But when I wasn't playing sports, I had to work, and I always liked cars. And as a mechanical, I always had a mechanical mind. My mom used to love to tell the story that I think I was 3 years old. We had some type of grandfather clock, and she left me with a babysitter, and I took this thing apart to figure out how it worked and destroyed it. But through that, like that's what I wanted to do, was work on cars, and it was a body shop, and my buddy had worked there, and he goes, "Man, come in, we need help." And I went in every day after school and begged this guy and begged for a job. I think for a month, every day I just annoyed him. And then finally he goes, "Okay, fine. If you want a job, let me see what you got." And he was like, "There's a mezzanine upstairs," and it had, like, I'm not joking, 1.5 inches worth of old body shop dust. There was parts and fenders from like 1950s vehicles. Had I known anything back then, I would have kept some of the stuff. Threw it all away, cleaned it 2 weeks for free. I worked like just filthy, doing jobs that nobody else would do. And finally he's like, "Oh man, I don't know anybody who would do that without complaining. Like, okay, we'll get you a job." Excuse me, we'll get you a job. But because I was so young, we thought like, "Oh, okay, I can be like a lot porter," because it was a dealership. And they go, "Oh, we couldn't," because of like the job description, I couldn't be on the paperwork because like lot porters move cars around, and I didn't have a driver's license in. So they wrote me in as a lot janitor, saying that I swept the parking lot. But that got me into the body shop, and basically I just learned how to color sand and tape cars, and then eventually started getting into body work and and my career kind of took off from there. But yeah, 15 working after school and then doing what we had talked about, like back then you could take ROP classes in high school. And so my senior year, I only had 2 real classes. It was civics, economics, and English. And those were the 2 requirements.
That's the way mine was.
Yeah. And I had enough extra credits that I really didn't need anything. And so everything else was ROP. It was ROP metal shop, ROP auto shop, and ROP wood shop. And so I'd go to school until about 8:15 in the morning. And then I would leave and go to work for the rest of the day and get school credit. And every once a week or whatever, I had to check in with that teacher and show my time cards. And so I've been working on cars for a long time.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. So what you do now kind of feeds off of what you did early in your life. Okay?
Yeah.
Not necessarily so much the motorsports part of it, the racing part of it, but more of the work you learned early in your life.
Yeah. So I do like a lot of custom metal work. So that body shop influence growing up has played a big part in like making body panels and patch panels and those kind of things, fender flares. And then the experience of like I built dump trucks for a long time, and so that built me like a lot of suspension geometry and hydraulics and electrical work and trying to design all that stuff. And so now I'm able to take that in combination with like the strict discipline of racing and the high degree of technicality, I guess is the right word. Basically, like in racing, you can't afford to make mistakes because you're going to lose a race or somebody's going to die.
Yeah.
So you've got to be like almost perfect exactly all the time. There's not much room for mistakes. And so I'm kind of combine all of that stuff and bring it to standard cars.
Okay. So in your shop here, I know you do custom work like you've talking. And you are a big LS guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you know that we're big Ford guys. Why LSs? Just tell me, because I know that you have a good explanation.
Yeah, well, because you can't make horsepower for as cheap as you can with an LS, right? It's so easy to go grab a $500 junkyard motor and either build it, put a truck cam in it, and make 500-600 horsepower pretty easy. Go buy some turbos, even some China turbos off eBay, slap them on there, make 800 to 1,000 horsepower pretty easy. Or go buy something that's a crate motor that's already been built for 15 grand and make 600 horsepower that's as reliable as your daily drive. Like
yeah. Now we try to argue that point, but the more we learn, I think the argument's not there.
Well, see, okay, so I can argue getting up to about 500 or 600 horsepower for cheap. I can argue that, but see, that's when a stock block 302 kind of, you start falling off there. It'll start breaking stuff.
Well, but the Coyotes are so expensive.
Yeah.
So you can't even argue
the thing about
Coyote.
The Coyote that the longer they're out there, everybody's realizing how dependable they are and how much power you can make out of a stock block Coyote. Mm-hmm. But you're still looking at motor and transmission $6,000 and $7,000.
Yeah,
and it's ridiculous.
But like I said, if you get like an old school push rod 302, I can argue with the cheapness factor of getting up to 500 or 600 horsepower. But then past that, NLS has it beat all the way, because then you got to get a new block for a 5.0, and I feel like for an LS, I mean, the stock bottom end can do what, like 600-700 horsepower maybe?
Oh, more than that. You put turbos on them. God, like I wish my neighbors were here. I'd take you over to my neighbors who are big straight line guys, and they love Camaros, but they take 5.3s and 6.0s. They put twin turbos on them. They'll run 15 pounds of boost to go get groceries, and then take them to a no prep event, turn them up to 40 psi, and make 1,200 horsepower, and then drive them home.
See, 40 psi is insane, because I just know I'm building my 5.0 right now, and I'm thinking, 10 is going to be pushing it for me.
Yeah.
And it's like 40 is insane.
And they're doing it on stock bottom ends, and the motors are so cheap. Like that's where Ford needs to catch up, because the Coyote platform is a good platform. I'm not going to argue that it's bad. It's great. It is the Ford version of the LS, but it's like 10 times the money. You run a stock 5.3, put some turbos to it, you blow the bottom end out of it. Okay, just go to a junkyard, pull out another one, and do it again.
Yeah, and you can't do that with the Coyote.
No. Well, and even now that the Godzilla has came out, the Godzilla can do the same thing to LS, because it looks basically like an LS. But you can't do it for the money. Those motors are more than Coyotes.
I mean, it's like,
but it's about
like
demand.
10 grand just for a motor, and it's
but it's about the demand. Those motors only come in 3/4 ton and 1 ton trucks.
Mhm.
You know,
Or a crate. You can get them as
or
a
you can
crate
buy them
motor.
as a crate.
Yeah.
The Coyote only comes in an F-150 or a Mustang. You know, so you don't have, like with the LS, it came in everything.
Anything they could put an LS
Yes.
in, they put an LS.
So you've got so many options out there, and it's the same way with a small block Chevy, a 350. You know, you could. There's 350s were in everything, and to where a 302 was in a Crown Vic, an F-150, or a Mustang.
I mean, there's still a lot of the
it wasn't a
302s, but you lose the like dependability at high power. Like with the LS, I mean, there's dependability throughout a lot of power, and it with a 302, it kind of cuts off at like 500 horsepower, like I was saying.
It does.
Then you kind of got to worry about cracking the block or throwing a piston through the side of it, or
You guys might be surprised to find out that I've raced more Fords than I do Chevy.
Have you really?
In my career. So I am a Chevy guy through and through. But the majority of the cars that I have raced or worked on, with the exception of like open wheel Indy Car and stuff, have been Ford motors.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
That was through some contingency programs back in the day. Chevy is great at R&D. I don't think that there is a better engineering crew throughout history than GM guys, right? Problem is GM has always been financially handicapped. At least I think they have, and so they have just amazing R&D that's just sitting on the shelves that they can't put into vehicles on the street. And Ford, I think, realized that pretty early. Ford has always had a very, very like storied history with racing, and they've always been really involved in racing. And when I came up, specifically in desert racing and off-road, Ford offered a huge contingency package. Like I think at one point, if you won the Baja 1000 with a Ford motor, it was $50,000 prize.
Oh wow!
And not a lot of people realize, but desert racing does not pay any money. Like you get a finishing pin. You're spending millions of dollars to get a 50-cent pin.
Yeah.
And it's more about like the honor of actually doing it. So to have a contingency package like that was huge. So engine builders then started developing Fords. And early on, as much as I'm a Chevy guy, it used to be in 302s and stuff, it used to be easier to make power in a Ford than it was a Chevy. Ford really choked their horsepower down in intakes and exhausts.
Yes.
Chevy did it in their heads, and so it was really a lot. As plentiful as a 350 or a small block Chevy was, it was a lot more money to build the same horsepower as it was a Ford. And so that's where you started getting like these 14-degree heads and all these crazy geometries, and they started making tons of power in Ford. And so that's, if you wanted to win, you had to race a Ford.
Yeah.
But the reliability of it is the issue. And so we raced a 69 Mustang that we had painted up to look just like Parnelli Jones' championship car from the Trans Am series. We raced with an organization called SVRA. They kind of picked up that Trans Am series, modernized it, and there was some true historic cars that really were Trans Am cars. But that class that we ran in was that you had to build it to those period specs. We ran a 302, it made 650 horsepower. It was a great motor. It ran awesome.
Stock block?
Well, no, not really, but you were allowed to bore 60 over, and they'd whistle check you, and but that we only got 3 races. Yeah. And then we had to pull that motor out. Yeah. We had to take it back, and it was just so maintenance heavy. We sold that car, went to a 64 Corvette. There's a picture of it right there on the wall. It ended up being one of the fastest cars in the country. It had a 327, and man, we'd run that thing all season long, and it made more horsepower. It just ran.
Well, when you think about Ford's CEO now, okay, he's a big motorsports fan, and he's really pushing the Mustang more into different types of racing. And it's pretty awesome to see, because it's very disappointing to me. Yes, you've got the Corvette. The Corvette is becoming a supercar. Yeah.
I'm kind of disappointed in the way it's going, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And it's not the everyday retiring guy's car anymore.
Yeah, it's no longer attainable. It's moved to that upper.
Well, especially when dealerships are marking it like tens of thousands of dollars above MSRP. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's not even attainable.
Ford is sticking with most of the motorsports that they've been involved in, and the Bronco has been a big one for the desert racing, like you're talking about, and the Baja stuff. So when I look at all that, it's pretty awesome to know that Ford is still they're still pushing for high performance cars. They've said that they're not going to pull the V8 out of the Mustang. It will always have a V8.
When you've got all these other muscle cars dying around it, and it's like the last one standing. It's cool to see.
The thing that saddens me, though, is when I was a kid, it was Chevy versus Ford. You know, growing up, if your buddy drove a Chevy, y'all compared together all the time, and I'll race you. And it was like that all the way up. And then now you're seeing these cars being phased out. To me, even though the Charger is coming back out, it's not the same as it was.
No.
And even that Hurricane, that's an inline six. Yes, I love inline sixes, but for a cruiser, not a performance car like that. So I'm just looking at it as Ford is the only company right now that really even cares about motorsports. I mean, they're the only ones putting out new stuff constantly. And it would be awesome if if the Ford Performance division would put out something that was economical for the average guy that's not a coyote. Let's put out a small block that
Yeah.
can build power that's economical for the average guy.
I think where that is for you guys, being Ford guys, is the EcoBoost.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably so. But a lot of your older guys though, they're not going to want to mess with it. I don't want to mess with that. He
Yeah.
probably would.
I might.
But I
I might
wouldn't
play
want
with
to
it a
mess
little
with
bit.
it.
Yeah, I guess that's
I've
true.
actually seen them make Coyote Power.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I think they're great little packages.
They are. They're good
And
motors.
before I allow you guys to throw down too hard on Chevy, I still
I ain't
work
throwing
with
down on
I
Chevy.
still work with Chevy, and Chevy, as much as Ford is in grassroots motorsports, I do want to point out that Chevy is in the upper echelon of
Yeah.
motorsports.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Still very much involved in Indy Car.
Yep.
Cadillac, which is a GM product, has now announced that they're going
Yes.
to join
I just saw that.
join F1. That's going to
Mhm.
be huge to have
Yeah.
an American presence in F1. I'm really excited for that.
That's gonna be cool.
So I really like what Chevy is doing in motorsports. I wish that they would expand that to more like grassroots level stuff. But,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just feel like it's kind of slowly going away. And
Mhm.
I think that maybe we might see a resurgence. I hope.
Yeah.
We've got a new president coming in who's
Yeah.
saying drill, baby, drill.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll turn some heads in different maybe Stellantis and General Motors will say, hey, okay, all electric is not the way to go. Let's bring back some of our performance stuff because that's
Yeah.
what people want. Who knows where that's going to lead?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. And if I don't want to say I want to get political or step on the soapbox for a second, but that is, if there's one thing I could like put out a message for anybody who's listening, is that one place we do need to band together is under that umbrella. And I'm not against electric personally. I think it's okay. I don't think it's great for the environment the way that they're saying that it is.
Yeah.
But what's happening is that we need groups like PRI, like SEMA, who
Yes.
are billing themselves as lobbyist firms for us.
Yeah.
We need them to go to bat for us.
Yeah.
And where I feel like they let us down is like, instead of going to bat and saying, hey, we need to protect these style of motorsports, this internal combustion engine, even if the future is hybrid or if it's electric or hydrogen, I feel like all they've done is just like, hey guys, here's the new electric wing of the PRI show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into this topic either, but I feel like they've gone the way of the NRA, where they just take your membership money and then they just go, hey, well, we tried, sorry guys.
Yeah.
And then you get states like California who are now literally trying to ban all cars made before, like, what is 1967 or something. I forgot what they just came out with, but that's like something that they're trying to pass super fast.
Mm-hmm.
And as motorsports guys, we like to tease each other. And for those of you guys who don't know, Indiana is huge in all sorts of racing.
Oh yeah.
But we like not only Indy Car and sprint car racing and dirt, but also pavement and drag racing. Most of the teams are here. And we tease each other, but there's also a division there where we feel like everybody's separate. And as long as, well, nobody's messing with our circle track stuff. So if they're gonna ban the no prep or all that, like, that's okay. That's not affecting me. But what happens is it affects all.
Yeah.
We need to band together as a whole.
Yeah.
I know that in the state of Kentucky, there has been a couple of congressmen that I know for sure are big backers of the hobbyist, the grassroots guy, and I have actually signed some of SEMA's petitions, and they go to that Congress member.
Okay.
And I've gotten responses, which is probably an automated response, but I've also gotten a response later down the road saying, this is what we did to help you guys,
That's great.
from that congressperson. And it's like, okay, that's cool. So we know that congressman is on our side. So that's the important thing, guys. We got to vote for congressmen and senators who are going to go up there and fight for us, and even local representatives. We've got our local state congress or state senator, however you want to say that. I can't think of state representative.
Yeah.
He is a big proponent of hot rodding because he has a few himself and owns a car dealership. So,
that helps.
Yeah, that helps. So we know that he's going to be on our side.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the stuff that happens at the state level eventually makes its way to
Absolutely.
the federal level. And so we got to stop it at the state level.
Yep.
And we've seen so much happen. And I'm thankful that we've got a president, I think, that's going to not slow down motorsports. He's not going to try to ban any of this stuff with his agencies because he's wanting to pull back on the EPA. He's wanting to pull back on all these agencies. And I think that helps motorsports. It's not like that we're all going out there trying to defy the government. We're all going out there just wanting to have a good time and enjoy our hobby, and if you're a racer, you're going out there to try to have a lot of fun and win some races, so we're not wanting to hurt the environment or go against our government, but taking away a lot of our freedoms is going to end the hobby.
I think this will be helpful for not only motorsports, but you mentioned NRA, so guns and things like that, because it'll get the government from overreaching on certain things.
Y'all
It's very helpful.
Started on that.
Yeah. No, we won't.
We can have a whole second podcast.
Yeah, we could. We won't get into all that, but I'm a big gun guy and a big car guy, so it
same.
I don't like overreach.
Yes. So we'll leave it at that. Let's get.
Yeah, we could have a whole other podcast talking just about that.
So let's get in about your motorsports background. So you're originally from California, which, if you guys haven't figured out by now, we're right outside Indianapolis.
Yes, sir.
So you're originally from California, and your motorsports kind of took off in Baja segment. Is that right?
Yeah, started in Jeeps. I kind of just, being from the West Coast, got into just off-roading. There's just it's one thing I wish Indiana had out here was more recreation. But out there, like, you just drive. You just leave town, and in 30 minutes you're in a mountain or you're in the middle of the desert, and you can just drive. Like, for my 25th or 26th birthday, one of my bosses, and he goes, "What do you want to do?" I go, "Man, let's just go drive Nevada. I don't want to see anybody." We spent 7 days in the desert. We went into town once for fuel.
Wow.
Right. We did like 650 miles.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so, but I just grew up with that, hunting and fishing and trying to get to back remote spots to go see beautiful nature, and that facilitated needing a 4-wheel drive. And then you start lifting your stuff, and then obviously being a car guy and mechanical. And then through my just actual mechanical career, was trying to get into motorsports over and over, and just God had a plan for me, thankfully, and that allowed me to get into that motorsports. And I went to a technical school for a while, and did really amazing there. Made some great friends, and that opened up some great connections through a super popular TV show. And so my entry into motorsports was with a company called Rubicon Express. And I'm still best friends with the owner, my old boss, and from there we developed and designed suspension systems. And so that's one of the things I know so much about the OEM, is because we worked hand in hand with Mopar Performance and with Chrysler and with some of the Jeep engineers. And at one point we actually designed a lift kit that was available to be private labeled it, so you could go buy a Jeep at the dealership, put Mopar's lift kit on it, which was our lift kit, have it financed into the price of your Jeep. It didn't void your warranty.
That's cool.
So it was a lot of fun. So that really exposed me to a lot of the OEM stuff, which was great. But through that, my boss was big into desert racing, and he helped start some of this new class, and it's called Jeep Speed, and that was based on a Cherokee. And it was kind of it was a very grassroots thing where you had to have a Cherokee body, which was a unibody. You could put a roll cage and do all the standard race safety stuff, but your suspension had to be something that was commercially available. So whether it was Rubicon Express or Rough Country or Superlift or anybody, you just had to be able to go buy it off the shelf, and then the shocks were open and they'd go race. Well, he helped start that class, and always wanted to get back into it. He had to take a back seat while he was growing the company, and then he was able to start the R&D program at Rubicon Express. Hired me, and I quickly worked my way into being the R&D manager and designing parts with him. And then we started the race program and started the 4100 series class with Jeep Speed, which is now under Best in the Desert sanctioning, I think. It's gone through some evolution since I've left, but that was essentially a trophy truck Jeep where we ran like 410. I had a Gary Stanton 410 Mopar V8 in that Jeep,
Dang.
making like almost 1,000 horsepower in a four-door
Oh,
JK.
dang. That's what I was getting ready to ask you. What kind of motors did you all run in? Because I know you weren't running the stock inline six.
No, no, man,
Definitely not.
that was a mistake that they made. That first motor was horrible in the four-door JK, but no, we had a 410 all aluminum, basically a sprint car motor that was detuned a little bit so you could run like 114 race gas.
That's cool.
Because you don't run alcohol in the desert.
Yeah.
And so we helped start that class, and then just the world being what it was, obviously the market turned down, and that could sadly the company closed its doors. But that really gave me the bug to go racing,
to get into motorsports.
Yeah, and once I went racing officially, like it just when people say it gets in you, it does. It gets in you.
Yeah.
And it has led my whole life since that point. And so when that job ended, sadly, it was a dream job. I'm still trying to recreate that job here with my company and my shop. But I went desert racing with a company or a team in Utah that had a trophy truck. They had a class 1 car, and they were big into off-road. And so there was 2 business partners, and one did the desert and one did short course off-road. And they were trying to grow that team. And so we went full hog on the racing. And so we were, at one point we were racing score, best in the desert, with the trophy trucks, occasionally with a class 1 car. And then we were racing both Lucas and Torque series in the short course off-road. We were racing a Pro Light, a Super Light at the time, which was a Mazda rotary based truck, and then a Pro and a Pro 2. And so Lucas was on the West Coast, Torque was out here in the Midwest. Plus, we were doing all the West Coast races, and it just, as a young guy, it was like I had the most fun. The most fun ever, because every weekend we were racing somewhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what is short course for those of us that don't know?
Okay, so short course is it's a closed course. It's dirt, and the best way to describe it is you are putting an off-road truck on a motorcycle track. And so it's literally like tabletops and rhythms and chicanes, but there's contact allowed. So one of the mottos of off-road short course racing is 8 tires are better than 4. And so people will come to the corners and they'll lean on each other. And, there's some gentlemanly agreements there that you're not going to door bash a guy, but it does happen. And so, if you want to play rough, people will play rough back with you.
That sounds like
that's pretty fun. It's a lot of fun. And I've graduated into IndyCar racing, and I'm a fueler now, which is like the most fun job I've ever done in my entire life. But there is something special about taking a 3,400-pound truck that's got 1,000 horsepower and jumping it 200 feet.
Oh yeah,
and then catching it right, and then catching it and going into a corner.
Yeah,
or drift or coming through like one of our biggest tracks is Crandon in the famous turn 1, where it starts as a land rush start where everybody is lined up on a line and the flag drops and everybody just races into the turn 1. But when that race starts going, you're drifting sideways through turn 1 at 140 miles an hour, and it's off camber. And if you lift, like, not only are you going to crash, but you're going to get past. And so just like, it's the most special form of motorsports ever. Like, I love the desert, and there's something cool about being in the middle of nowhere in a $500,000 trophy truck, and the things that they do and going over 3-foot whoops is just like, and feeling it, but seeing it, it's just like, that is really cool. But there's something about short course, man. Like, there's a track, Bark River, that's my favorite, and it literally is. It's you jump about 200 feet, and they have a little marker, and there's like a little booth that people pay extra to get to, and it's a natural terrain track where you go and you race through, and the earth comes up, and then it falls away, and I'm not sure exactly how fast you're going at that point, but you're about 25 feet in the air, and the trucks fly for roughly 200 feet. And then they land, and within about 50 feet of that landing, you're going into a left-hand turn. Right? And you just watch it, and then it's carbureted, and so they lift, and you get these big stabbed flames, and you're just like, man, it's just cool.
I've learned about so many different types of racing that I've never heard of before, just in a little bit we've talked.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Like, I'm really interested in the Mazda rotary base thing. I think that's really cool, because I've watched a lot of drag racing stuff, and rotaries are insanely fast in drag racing. It is unbelievable how fast they make those cars. So I didn't know that they did it in like off-roading and stuff too. That's cool.
Yeah, it's gone away now.
Oh man,
it was a spec series class. You kind of had to buy the truck from these guys that were based out of, I forget where they're based at originally, but they ended up being based out of Reno. And it was cool. It was a really like low power entry class.
Yeah.
It was like 10 to 12 inches of suspension travel based on like the Ford Ranger and the Mazda, which is basically the Ford Ranger.
Yeah.
And what's cool was it was a rear / mid engine rotary.
Oh, really?
Ran like electric Charlene power steering. Really, the trucks were super cheap to get into. And so you could race on pretty low maintenance stuff.
Yeah.
But still really, really excellent, good racing. It just sounded like a can of bees running around the
Yeah.
racetrack.
They don't sound the greatest.
No,
but
not at all.
they're definitely cool. And like I was saying with the drag racing and stuff, people make insane power out of those rotaries. I didn't realize rotaries could make as much power as they
Yeah.
do. And they put them in these little lightweight like starlets and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes you wonder why so many people LS swap RX-7s.
I'm guessing because
RX-8s.
it's just cost so much more. I would
Probably.
assume a rotary costs a lot more than an LS. But
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And rotaries are pretty maintenance heavy.
Yes.
Those rotor wipes.
If I'm not mistaken, you got to run like 2-stroke oil and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it's annoying just to like drive an RX-8. Most people don't drive there's RX-8 very often. People sell them and LS swap them because you just got to like every time you fill up, there's 2-stroke oil going in.
Yeah, basically, they burn a ton of oil. You always got
Yeah.
to do compression checks on them.
Yep.
Super duper maintenance heavy.
I've never had any experience with them. I've only rode in the RX-7 one time, and that was pretty fun though.
Really?
Yeah, that was a blast.
What? I didn't know you rode an RX-7.
Yeah, I rode an RX-7. My brother was going to buy one time, and they let him keep it for the weekend, so we went and played in it, and he decided he didn't want it and took it back.
Oh.
So that was interesting. But that was a fun time. But so you talked about the off-roading, and you mentioned you're a spotter in Indy.
Uh-huh.
So how did you end up in Indianapolis?
So through short course off-roading, essentially, so that team I was with in Utah was starting to dissolve. The business partners there were starting to make money and do some different things, and so they started pulling back, and then they basically just kind of stopped racing. But through that, I met Ari Leindyke Jr. He was sponsored by Cooper Tires. Cooper had acquired Mickey Thompson at that time, and so they were making a big push into the off-road short course stuff. And we were one of their, I don't know if we were one of the first, but we were pretty early adopters of the Cooper stuff, and they sponsored us. And Ari, coming from Indy Lights and the Indy Car background, Indy Lights was running Cooper Tires, and so they go, hey, he was looking for somewhere to transition. They go, man, we think that you really like this off-road stuff, and we think it's pretty cool. And so they paid for him to come join us. We had an extra truck. And so we ran a couple races together in the Pro Light, and I was trying to come up in the team. And at that time I was kind of running the fab shop, but I really wanted to like get to that like kind of crew chief, engineer type level. And so I was really hungry and trying to learn. And with Ari coming on board, that gave me a chance to like really be like, hey, let me be his guy. Let me work on that truck. And so he and I developed a relationship. And he wanted to get into Pro 2. I wanted to get into Pro 2, which is like that was one of the premier classes. And the Pro 2 is semi-regulated on rules, but it's 2-wheel drive, full body style trucks. So with like a Ford Raptor was like the big body style at the time. We're talking about Ford development. And then they had a Pro 4, which was like basically open rules, but it's 4-wheel drive, sequential gearboxes. Those things are like outrageous. And so, but Pro 2 was like the step into the premier class.
Yeah.
And so Ari wanted to do that. Obviously, I wanted to do that. We were on CBS Sports on Saturday mornings at that time. Like the series was going like gangbusters. And so when that team dissolved, Ari and I joined together and started a team. We were sponsored by Gunk, and so I was kind of his main guy. And at that time, we decided, hey, what are we going to race? Are we going to race Lucas, or are we going to race Torque in the Midwest? And Lucas was kind of, I wouldn't say they were struggling, but we didn't like their management style at the time, and it just felt like that they felt like they were doing favors to us as a racer. And Torque was just much more family friendly, where they were happy to have you. Everybody there was super friendly. Like if you had questions and needed resources on racing, and it's just much more of the racing I know now of like, you need parts, you can go over to somebody, hey man, I'm out on this part, you guys happen to have a spare. Lucas was not that way at all. And so we decided, hey, let's go Torque racing. And for Ari, it worked better because through his dad and Ari's Indy Car connections, being based out of Indianapolis, it's fairly centrally located in the country.
Oh, yeah.
So with Torque, the farthest west we ever went was Texas, which is basically a day and a half drive from here. But everything else was within about 8-9 hours. I could get there in a day. And so he goes, hey, let me just lean on some resources here. Let's get a shop in Indianapolis. And we were raced out of here. And at that time, I was still living in Utah. So I was commuting by airplane, where I'd fly in, work on the truck for 3-4 days, load everything up. We'd drive to the racetrack. We'd race for the weekend. I'd drive back here, wash the truck, tear it apart, order parts, go home for a week or two till everything showed up, come back, So I was like, basically I was home for 1 to 2 weeks a month at best.
Yeah.
And then I was like, there was nothing in Utah for me really. I had a relationship there that kind of had fallen apart, partially because it was God's plan, thankfully, but also I was just focused and driven on racing that nothing else mattered. So part of that was on me too. But anyways, didn't have anything there, and at that time, Gunk is based out of Charlotte, and so they were trying to convince us to move to Charlotte, which is also a racing capital. And I just kind of felt like Indiana felt closer to home. I had more friends here at that time, because in the off season of off road, I would then go hop in the truck with our buddy who ran this King of the Wing sprint car pavement series, which is like World Outlaws but for pavement. And that time they would go do their West Coast swing as the weather changed. So I'd hop in the semi truck with him, go race for a couple months, head back west, get a free ride home, make a couple bucks, and then come back. And it was time to start our season again. And so that really opened me up into pavement racing and open wheel racing. Like up until I moved to Indiana, I was dirt through and through. Like, I mean, I knew of the Indy 500 and I would watch it on TV. Had zero interest in it.
Yeah.
And then kind of started learning sprint cars, and like they sprint, as much as I love trucks and am special with trucks, sprint cars might be one of my favorite forms of motorsports because it's just so raw. There's no telemetry, there's no nothing. You're making as much horsepower as you can, and everything is about weight. And if it doesn't need a washer, it doesn't get it. And so it literally is like you buckling yourself to a motor, and you're just
highest power, lowest weight you can possibly get.
Sprint cars, 410 sprint cars are probably the only car I've ever built that I don't know I have the cojones to drive. Like
Wow.
I routinely tell people, I ask my drivers to do stuff that I'm too afraid to do. I know what the car will do, and if a driver ever challenged me on it, where I'm like, you need to step it up and get on the gas, and he'd be like, you get your butt in there. I'd be like, oh, hold on a minute, like, my job's to build them, you drive them.
Yeah,
that's the arrangement, like, But no, I mean. Man. But through that, anyway, that opened, and then Harding Racing joined with Gabby Chavez, and they started a team. It was just going to be a one-off team at the beginning to start the Indy 500, and they just needed a spotter. And in off-roading, there is spotting, like I talked about, just trucks crashing into each other, and you got to make sure you're clear. And one of the biggest dangers in off-road racing is coming off a jump and either trying to set yourself up from a corner and crossing somebody over, or coming off a jump sideways, and that leads to some really dangerous accidents. So the spotters are pretty crucial there.
That's on short track, right?
That's on short course, yeah. And so they go, they go, you ever spotted before? And I told them, and they go, you should be fine. And I'm like, well, and they're telling me all these statistics, and it's true. Like Indy cars, the front stretch, it's a 2.5 mile track at Indy. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head how long the front stretch is. I should know that. But they will cover that distance. They'll basically cover a half a mile in just a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
And so to call that, like you're looking at turn 4 at the car, but like your other eye is looking in turn 1, because if there's a crash in turn 1, he needs to know about it in turn 4 so he can slow down in time.
Yeah.
Because if you're at the start finish and you call it late, like he's going to run into that crash. And so they're telling me all these things, and I'm starting to get nervous, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, like everything happens so fast, and it does. And they're like, you got it. Right. And they just kind of like threw me to the wolves. And so my first week I'm up there and I'm like nervous and like literally like, I'm sweating and cotton mouth. And I'm like, oh my, this guy's going to die.
Yeah.
And like, what do I tell him? And now you're like in Indy car racing too. And so these are like, you're looking at these guys as like essentially like gods of driving. Right. And you're like, what am I going to tell him? Right. He's going to be like, shut up. Like, and so it was just really nerve wracking, but the off-road experience actually really did help. And it took me a long time to kind of learn, get used to that pace of the IndyCar stuff, because it does happen so quickly. Like they'll do that 2.5 miles in like 20, 30 seconds. Like when you're at a spotter, you lose them at the back part of the track. And from turn 2 to essentially the entry of turn 4, it takes about 14 seconds. And you're counting that as they leave, like one Mississippi too, because they're so far away you can't identify your car all the time. Mm-hmm. And so you look about like who's near them, and then you count to 14, and you should see your car at about 14 seconds pop out, and then you're like, okay, there he is. And then you find him in your binoculars.
So when there's a caution, you're probably like, I get a break.
Yeah. We're like, okay, take a breath, right? You're talking to him like, hey man, shake the blood back in your arms. Yeah. Yeah, but you can't drink too much water because you can't leave to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So you're up there for 4 hours in the baking sun trying to not be dehydrated.
Well, I guess sweating helps it though. That keeps you from having to go to the bathroom constantly.
Yeah.
Everything you drink just sweats back out of you.
Yeah. You got to be concerned about what you eat that morning and just certain things. And that was always good. I loved it. It got me involved and it kept me current. And I always used that as kind of, by that time I had opened my shop. And so I always kind of used that as a, like a fallback plan. I'm like, hey, staying current keeps me in racing. And if the shop ever doesn't work out, at least I know I can, hopefully get a job at one of these, Indy Car teams. And I really liked I did that for a number of years. I think I spotted for, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. And I enjoyed it. And then I just stopped enjoying it for a time. And I go, it was the least qualified job. And as much as I like spotting and that I was good at spotting, I've got friends who are legitimately professional spotters. And those guys are phenomenal. I mean, they've got 4 radios and they're monitoring all this traffic and they're looking at lap times and they're comparing there's stuff that I didn't do. I'm just like, hey man, I'm going to keep you out of traffic, keep you safe. I can see what your car's doing and help you and maybe help engineering. Like, hey, we got some push, we got some understeer, and maybe the car's tight, whatever. So I'm mixing different terms because IndyCar speaks a little bit differently. But, I can kind of help here. Like, oh, your line's a little bit off. This guy's running a little bit quicker in this segment. But the guys who are professional spotters are just above and beyond me. But where my passion is and where I really like being is in the pit and working on the car, turning wrenches and doing a lot of the setup stuff. And so I always really, really, really wanted to get back in there. And then one year I just kind of had to make the decision where I wasn't going to spot again. And I just was like, okay, if I don't get a job spotting, I really wanted to go over the wall and be on the pit crew, but those spots are very, very hard to get, especially as a one-off guy.
Yeah.
And I just kind of succumbed to the fact where I go, okay, if I watch it from the couch this year because that's what I'm going to do, that's fine. I'm done spotting. I don't enjoy it, and it's too much work and it's too stressful to not enjoy it. And luckily, by that time, I had developed a relationship with a phenomenal team called Dreyer Reinbold, and they do a lot of stuff in motorsports as well. But they every year they race the 500, and they're a very top-notch quality team, and they are there to win. That's their sole purpose. Is they don't race full time, but when they're at Indy, that's what they want to do and win. So by that time, I had joined up, developed a really good relationship with a phenomenal team, Dreyer Reinbold Racing, and they do a lot of stuff in motorsports. They do the World Rallycross and Global Rallycross, and they're really, really good at that. But they're also really good at Indy, and so that's their whole goal. Is they don't really have the budget to run a full-time team at Indy, but when they're there, their only goal is to race. They're a one-off team, but they do things just as good as anybody else. And if you're on that team, you're there to win, and basically that's it. So they have called me. I developed a good relationship with them, and they called me to spot. And I politely declined. I felt like I had a good enough relationship with them that I could be open and kind of vulnerable with Chase, the team manager. And I just kind of spilled my heart out. And I go, man, I really love spotting, and I don't want to let you guys down. And I do feel like you guys treat me like family. But my heart's not in it. If you guys can't find anybody that you can trust, that you're willing to risk somebody on, please call me. I will absolutely spot for you. But I really want to go over the wall. I want to fuel. I'm built like a fueler. The fuel probes, they weigh 60 some pounds when they're full, and they're big. I mean, the nozzle's about 4.5, 5 inches, and I mean it's no easy feat to carry that thing around when it gets fully loaded. And you got to plug in, and it's got to be perfect, and it's got to be straight. And I tell people all the time, when you're fueling, it's like standing on the white line of the highway because the cars are doing 60 miles an hour in the pits, and then trying to stick a key in the door as the car's driving by. That's how accurate you have to be. Any little bit of angle, and the probe will not go in. Any little bit of angle, and the probe will not come out. And that's happened to me before.
And you're handling the weight of the can.
Yeah, handling the weight. It was not a can; it's a hose.
Okay.
Yeah, so it comes off a big fuel tower behind you, and you've got a
it's been so long.
I'm thinking NASCAR, and you got this big thing over your shoulder.
And we drive real race cars. We don't drive track.
But still, the hose is heavy too.
Yes. Yeah. The whole thing. And that's why I say, just what you're holding up on the probe is about 60 pounds by the time it's full of fuel, and you've got to be super accurate and be able to extend your arms out to get it. And so fuelers are big guys. And typically the tire changers are little because they're quick. They can get around the car. And so that's what I told Chase. I go, man, I really want to fuel. I just feel like that's just what I've always wanted to do, and it's just a goal of mine to go over the wall, and I want to be on an Indy Car pit crew at one point. And obviously, I was untested. I had never done it before. I had fueled in a couple of other things that we do, but it doesn't compare to the Indy 500. Yeah. And the Indy 500 it's the largest sporting event in the whole world. Like field day sporting event, 350,000 people attend.
That's crazy.
Your brain can't, even when you see it, your brain can't fathom the amount of people being in the middle of it.
We've got to come one year.
You've got it.
You've got to do it.
So needless to say, the stakes are extremely high, right? And it costs $2 million to run that race by the time it's done, for the motor release and the tires and the guys, and just the guys' pay and all the stuff. So to even get a shot, to ask that was a huge ask. And that's where I felt like I had a good enough relationship with those guys to be like, hey, this is really what I really want to do. And at that time, they only ran one car. And so we go, hey, we've already got a fueler, right? A guy named Booty, who's just, he's a great friend and a brother, and really taught me a lot. And he's a mentor in terms of that. And I go, I get it. I'm just letting you guys know. And he called me about 2 weeks later, and he goes, okay, we signed another car. We got Santino Ferrucci. We need another fueler. I've got some people on speed dial, but I will let you come in for a tryout. And I got super excited. He goes, this is a tryout. This is not a guarantee. I go, that's fine. No. That's all I want, man. I just want to try.
Yeah.
Right? I go, just give me a chance. I know I can do it. Just give me a chance. And he goes, okay, we'll just come in, and we'll kind of walk you through it. And I go, okay. And so I did. I showed up, and they kind of gave me a rundown for about 15 minutes. Like, hey, here's what it is. Just get comfortable with it and feel it. And this is how it works. And Booty kind of showed me some things, and they go, okay, let's see what you got. And it turns out that I'm pretty good, right? I'm naturally gifted, I guess, in that pretty quickly I was as fast as Booty, and Booty is phenomenal. I use him as a measuring stick because, one, he's been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
But it
gave you goals to reach.
Yeah, definitely goals to reach, and it is a high enough level that I jokingly say that I'm a professional athlete, even though I may not look like it, and I'm not quite as trim as I was when I played college football. But we are competing in hundredths of a second, sometimes thousands of a second, and so we have an actual coach that come and meets with us. We film our practices, and then afterwards we debrief, and they break it down frame by frame. Okay, hey, you made this mistake. And what ends up happening is it's the butterfly effect in a pit stop, is that a car comes in, and if he stops short and somebody's got to move a half a step, well, that costs 100,000ths of a second. And then it just starts adding up, and then pretty soon now you leave the pit a second and a half later because all these things start adding up.
Yeah.
And so during our practices, that's what we do. We do 2 practices a day, or 2 practices a week, an hour a day. And it legitimately is like being on a professional team, which I love. Being a football player, you have a coach giving you tips, and you're working on stuff, and you're getting warmed up, and you're stretching, but God luckily made me a particular size where I can just stand pretty comfortably, and I'm strong enough to handle the hose, and it just my eye coordination is good enough, either from playing sports or from doing fabrication stuff, but I'm able to see that pretty well, and I was able to adapt pretty quickly, and even I was surprised where I go okay, am I missing something? And they're like, no, that's good. And I'm hitting the Buckeye pretty hard. Where I'm am I going to break this thing? And they're like, no, we've never seen anybody break it. And so sometimes I'll hit it so hard the car rocks, and the driver's like, holy crap, and I just see red when I'm there, and the guys tease me because I get so hyped up. We go to the raid, the car leaves, and I'm like, woo, and they're kind of like, oh man, this is old stuff. But they tease me a lot. But I go, this is the best thing in my life I've ever done ever. I would do it for free, but it's so fun.
Yeah.
Car leaves. And
so are you actually going over the wall, or are you on the inside?
No, over the wall.
So you're over the wall with so you're coming up over the wall with that hose.
Yeah, so that hose, there's a big arm, and it's kind of behind me on this left side. And I have a guy who's on a dead man, and that's for safety, that if something happens or something leaks, and he stops the flow of fuel. And that is alcohol. And so when it burns, they put a little bit of stuff in it so that you're supposed to be able to see the burn, but in daylight it burns so clear that you can't see it. So there's a guy with a water hose, and
it's kind of nerve-wracking, honestly.
It is.
I'd be a little scared.
Yeah, you're essentially just it's I wouldn't say it's explosive. It's not a bomb, but you're playing with very, very flammable
that you can't see.
Yeah, you can't see. and like a little bit of static discharge can light it off, and you're right by the turbo on the exhaust, and so where you get a lot of fires is when I pull out, it'll splash through the fans and hit a turbo, and you'll get like a little flare up, and so that's why you see them squirt with water every time they leave, just because you can't see it, so it's just kind of like the water dissipates the alcohol, and it's just kind of like a safety thing. But that dead man's on this big swinging arm, and even that makes a difference. So we have a specific measurement as to how long that support arm comes out, and even an inch in or an inch out changes the hose geometry. And like I said, a couple thousandths of an inch, and that probe won't go in. And so every time I'm checking it, and then I've got exact marks where I stand, and a specific foot movement where I know, okay, that foot goes here, that foot goes here. I'm holding it, and when I step in, it's like a 45-degree step this way, and my foot ends up under the car. Sometimes the car drops on me, like I step so far underneath it that if I'm slow, the car will drop on top of my foot. So that gives me encouragement to get out of the way. But everything is exactly precise, and it's choreographed, and it's just
that's insane.
that hose wraps around me, and so like I've got. Like I'll put like leather patches on my suit and grip tape on the hose to hold it in a specific way. And luckily I've got a love handle that the hose rests on. And so like I know like, okay, if the hose is sitting right there on my little fat roll and I tuck it into my elbow and my arm sits here on the handle, like everything is just kind of like perfect. And then you just get comfortable. And then I sing Bob Marley to myself, because if you get too over anxious, like you can really, really mess up. And so you got to be really relaxed and calm. And so I end up singing "Don't Worry" in my all day. Just don't worry. I just kind of hum that to myself, and I eat my little Sour Patch Kids, because it's the same thing as you can't really leave.
Yeah,
because if the car breaks or the driver's got a problem, you can't be like in the porta-john. You know, with your suit down, you got to be ready to go.
Ready to go.
So crazy, because like like you watch this on TV, and you're like, man, these guys obviously work together. They know what they're doing. But in my mind, I'm not thinking all of the exact precise like distances
Details
between stuff. And you're like, it has to be this far apart. My foot has to be right here at this point.
Yeah.
That's insane to me how much goes into it.
Yeah, we're measuring it by inches, and I'm not kidding you. Like, we will tell the driver, like, hey, you're 3 inches off your marks. Because that just means that we all have to move just a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's not for me, like, I can adjust. It's better if the car goes long, because you can follow the car if you're with the gun or with the fuel probe, you can follow. Short is really bad, because you're set up waiting for the car to be here, and if he's here, all of a sudden you're like, and everything needs to be readjusted. So during practice we'll be like, hey,
I mean, even like a millisecond is too much. So.
Yeah, well, when they're traveling that speed, right? So 100 yards in, I think it's like 3 or 4 seconds. A half a second is essentially a car length.
Yeah.
So if you can get out a second quicker than the next guy, you can end up gaining spots just in the pit, because now you're X amount of track length ahead of somebody coming off of turn 4. And so it really becomes like, it's super crucial.
So what is your all's typical pit stop time?
Depends on how you measure it. So we don't really know how Indy Car measures it. So depending on where you go, sometimes they'll measure it from car stop to car leave, or it can be car up to car down. So if we measure it car in the air to car down, we're like 6.5 seconds, between 6 to 6.5.
So
and
crazy.
that's all 4 tires and about 18.5 gallons of fuel.
That is nuts.
That's so crazy.
Now, when you watch on TV, and that's where we don't know, we try to figure out, and IndyCar won't tell you, because like you're looking for any advantage that you can get, and so you ask the official, hey, you guys measure that, and they're like, they don't like to tell you. You'll look at it; it's about 7 to 7.5 seconds for an IndyCar pit stop, and so if you're over 7.5, you're out to lunch.
Yeah,
you're low 7s. You're doing pretty good.
Yeah, that's so crazy, man. That is so fast. It's ridiculous.
And just getting in, right? I mean, the boxes are 20 feet long. The cars are 16.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to get in around the car and get parallel or slightly out. However, the guy likes to park, so you got to get used to that. But you got to be able to get in the pit box and out of the pit box and not hit anybody. Like, not hit the car, not hit that guy's tire changer who's hanging outside.
Yeah.
Not hit your guys. Right. And that's like, I stand, part of me being quick is I stand pretty far out instead of sitting back against the wall. And it's a huge risk, because where I could get run over. But like the first couple times, if the driver's not used to it, he's like, dude, I come into the pit, and you're like, it's like you're standing in the middle. And literally when they turn in, I'm looking at the nose cone of the car.
Yeah.
And it feels like he's going to hit you. And you just have to like trust, like, okay, buddy, just turn right. Please don't run over my toes.
Yeah.
And I have got my toes run over a few times where it comes in a little tight, and then he'll be like, "Sorry, it's good, man. You're here. It's okay." But
that's crazy.
You just got to know, like, if I move, we're slow. Just please don't hit me.
Yeah.
Because you see that nose wing, and it'll break your ankles. It'll take you out.
I bet.
So, for someone who is wanting to enter motorsports, like in general, what advice would you give?
Work on everything that you can. It doesn't matter if it's a lawnmower, even little electronic stuff, because nowadays everything is so electronics based.
Mm-hmm.
Just learn, right? It's really about a knowledge base. Build your own stuff, bicycles, lawnmowers, whatever you can do. Work on your own car. And a cheap way to do that is go to the junkyard, pay $20, take stuff apart.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's super cheap class.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if you break something. Like, oh,
yeah.
You walk in there with your toolbox.
Yeah.
And so do that. So you build your knowledge base and have a good time. But then if you really want to go racing, you got to volunteer. Sadly, what most of racing is grassroots motorsports.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I acknowledge that I have lived an extremely blessed life, in that I've been able to do this professionally for such a long time and be able to earn a living doing that. That is very much not the case for most people racing.
Yeah.
98% of all racing in this country is all volunteer based.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just go to your local track, whatever it is. Even if you're not that into it, you just want to get into racing, just go find a local track and just ask anybody if, hey man, you want me to wash your tires, scrape mud, just go hang out. And the other place that people need help all the time, is where we struggled as a race team, is in the garage.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to show up to the racetrack, right? They always, hey man, I'll work for a free t-shirt. What you got in the cooler? What, you got hot dogs and hamburgers on the grill. Everybody wants to show up at the race day and be part of the race team. But 98% of the racing, it happens in the garage.
Yeah, before you get there.
Yeah, doing all the prep and getting the car set up. And there's just so much. The majority of racing really is cleaning the car. It comes back there. You got to clean it. You got to take everything apart. You got to inspect stuff.
It's maintenance and stuff. Not a lot of people want to do.
And that's where you look around and all of a sudden it's crickets. And you're like, hey, man, where'd you go, buddy? You're all into this.
Exactly.
You're a racer for life. And, but now when it's 7 o'clock on a Wednesday, where are you at?